All right. So anyone had any thoughts or anything practical that happened over the week based on last week's class?
Actually, got to see our Rebbitzin at Chabad this week and was talking to her about it. And I sent her the class because she was going to check out the class because she was like, well, I didn't think that, head covering was a Noahide thing. We had a nice little chat about that.
And I was thinking just something else, which we didn't really mention last week, but something that I was thinking about like last night, or maybe today, is I think part of modesty is also really looking beautiful in your modesty. Like Danielle said about Sabra last week. It's really part of it. Because if someone's really modest and looks really like a rag, that's not a very good billboard for God. And that's not how God wants you to look. God wants you to look good, like you slept a bit, and put together. Again, everyone can have a very different version of what put together means. Everyone can have a very different version of what good means. We all have different personal styles, what we're comfortable with, how we want to express ourselves. But on some level, I think that should also be part of an awareness of looking through my closet and gradually weeding out the things that could be modest if I wore something under and something over and something and pinned it and this did and that. And by the way, I never do any of those things. So just chuck it out. I think also, and I do this when I look through my closet, things that just are like, as I say, too schlumpy. Like just don't portray how God wants me to look, I think. Don't portray that somebody would look at me and say, oh, wow. That's what you look like when you're a religious Jewish woman? Okay, great. That looks good. That looks appealing. That could look like something I would like to look like. So I think as a Noahide, every Noahide is such a billboard. There's far fewer Noahides than there are religious Jews. And there's far more non-Jews than there are not religious Jews. So every Noahide is a huge billboard representing God to the world, right? There's 8 billion mankind. How many Noahides are there? So every one of you is really, who knows who's looking at you and processing, that's what it looks like to be a Noahide. And you can say, oh my gosh, I don't want that pressure. But it's true. And I think part of being that close to God is you should look good. You should look beautiful. Oh, my version of beauty isn't your version of beauty. No problem. But for your version of beauty, you should look beautiful. You should look put together. Ideally, you should look regal and dignified and graceful and modest. And it should be very beautiful. Because being so close to God should be very beautiful on every single level, including how you look. So that's just an extra thing for people to think about as they're processing modesty, also processing in a way of like beautiful. Like God definitely wants us to look beautiful. And I know like when the Lubavitcher would speak about a woman wearing a wig, instead of, let's say, a hat to cover their hair, even if one could wear a hat that every hair was perfectly covered, they would say, like, a woman should look beautiful. And the Rebbe would encourage women to buy wigs that look beautiful and make them feel beautiful. And that you want to look beautiful as a modest Jewish woman. You don't want to look like, suffering as a modest Jewish woman. You want to look beautiful. And I think the same thing as a Noahide. You want to look modest. And you want to look beautiful, not attracting, but attractive. You want to express beauty. That's part of being regal and royal and close to God. It should look very, very beautiful. Any thoughts on that? Have any of you felt like you're getting more beautiful as you're keeping God's laws? Sabra?
Well, I need to beautify my closet. I have this closet that's so crammed full. When we got married, Bob opened the door and things started falling out at him. And most of it, he got scared. I heard him yell. And most of it is clothing that has been in there for years. And my question is, it's not scandalous. It's not inappropriate, but it's not all of it is modest. It doesn't cover my elbows or my arms. And is it okay to donate those items of clothing that maybe aren't modest that I want to part with?
That's such an interesting question. That is such an interesting question. Can you donate? You don't want to put someone else in the wrong situation. Can you
Right.
donate clothing that is by definition not modest? Well,
By
let's say, I
our
would think it depends
definition.
how it's not modest. Like if it's low cut, I would say
No,
no. No, because you know whoever
no,
would wear it's going to be inappropriate.
right.
If it's like, well, maybe if someone was a different size than me, it would be modest on them. Or maybe just someone just needs to lengthen the sleeve or something. Like I think it
Hmm.
depends how immodest it is. But something like, no, I'm never going to wear this modestly. You're right.
Okay.
100%. That's a very great sensitivity. Wow, I'm really impressed because I never thought about that. Because I guess my issues are, my clothing is modest. That's not the problem. But I can have other problems. I trust me, I have bags and bags of
Uh,
clothing I always am giving away. Like it doesn't feel right to me. I don't feel like it's expressing how I should be dressed. But I think that's a tremendous deep sensitivity. And I think what you're saying is really on target and a very deep point. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think as you're looking at the clothing, you really have to ask yourself, not like in the wild war, the wild theory of that's never going to happen. Well, if they did this to it and they did this to it and they did this to it, they can make it modest. Yeah, but they're not going to do any of that.
hmm.
But like
May
more
I add to that,
realistically,
please?
sure, Dixie.
You wouldn't want anybody else to sin, so you can't.
Exactly. No, that's exactly her question. That's exactly her point.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, though. We do not want to cause anybody to sin, so we do not give away clothes that are immodest.
Mhm.
Maybe they can be tailored, cut apart, and make smaller for somebody else that would be a modest clothing.
Mhm.
That's what
But
I'm
also,
saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying if the item on someone else could be modest, if they had a different figure or this and that, like sometimes it happens. It used to look right on us, just now it doesn't because, our bodies shift over the years. Then I think it'd be comfortable. If someone was shorter than me, oh, it would cover their needs just because I'm taller, so it doesn't. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? There's certain, I mean, I'm not tall. I'm an example. There are certain things where you could look and say, this could be modest on someone else. There's no problem. But I think if you know it can't, yeah, exactly as Dixie's
Right.
saying, exactly as you're saying, Sovereign, I think that's a really, really sensitive point to realize that. Wow, very
Okay.
impressed.
Thank you.
So you just do what I do sometimes. Like when I look at my clothing and my children's clothing, I just went through all of Beryl's clothing because Baruch Hashem, he grew, which is so exciting.
Oh,
Now that he's 12 and he's in some clothing, a size 10. That's so exciting. I can't believe we got to a size 10 in some
oh,
clothing. And all of his size 6s are way too small, but I can't give them all away because some things, they're ripped, they're stained, like I'm not going to give that away. I can only give away something
right.
nice, that's decent. So what do you do with the other things? It either becomes a rag or it goes in the garbage. So you're looking through your clothing, and some things might be good rags, and some things are going to go in the garbage, and some things are appropriate to donate.
Okay. It should be clear to me if I take my time and be prayerful about it.
Hmm. Yeah, you're asking God for help to really, be sensitive, and you don't want to take something that could help someone else and put it in the garbage. But as you
Right.
said, you don't want to take something and cause someone to sin.
Right. And you don't know what person is going to take it to extremes by oh hemming it or lengthening it, or we don't know who's going to purchase it and what they're going to do with it.
Right. So you have to be realistic. And if realistically it could be modest, and someone actually gets it and is not modest with it, all right, you
Oh,
did your part. I mean, listen,
right.
you're not someone else's, guardian. You did your part. Anything
Mhm.
modest, if you want, you can make not modest.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is more, or you're not saying, well, it's short, but if someone lengthened it, yeah, but nobody in the world is going to lengthen it. So no
Yeah,
one's going to lengthen it.
that's true.
So that's it. It's beautiful, and the way I serve God is by putting it in the garbage.
Yeah.
Just think of it like that.
Right.
I
It's
tell
not
myself about
wasteful.
leftover food. I'm not supposed to become the garbage can. I'm not serving God by eating this leftover food that is not good for my body.
Mm-mm.
So similarly, here, the way I serve God is by putting it in the garbage. Just like I meant by the leftover food, I could be serving God by putting it in the garbage. Because
Mhm.
maybe that's, I'm not the garbage can. And there's a reason why there's a garbage can, and that's why I could serve God, saying I can respect my body enough to not, eat everyone's leftovers. So I'm saying similarly, you can serve God by saying, I'm serving God by putting this in the garbage. I'm serving God by not allowing someone to wear this inappropriately. I'm serving God and repenting for if I wore it when it was not appropriate by putting it in the garbage. And that's how I'm rectifying the damage that was done. And that's how I'm showing God that I repented and changed. So it's not like, oh, what a waste of such a nice outfit. It's like, this is how I'm serving God.
Okay, thank you.
Really good point. Anyone else have had to go through something like that? I remember, this goes back many years ago, many years ago, like 40? Oh my gosh, getting older. That was like 40 years ago. I was just out of high school, and my roommate was someone who was raised not religious and now was becoming religious. She was religious. And she didn't give up her jeans. She found it so hard. I guess, teenagers, she was so connected to her jeans. And she didn't wear them. She was past that point. She wasn't going to wear pants. But she still owned them. And she, in her head was like, well, I'm going to make them into skirts. And, she tried and wasted money trying to make pants, denim skirts. And it, totally didn't work. And eventually they did all go to the garbage. It was a process. It was a process of disengagement.
Yeah, letting go.
Detaching, of letting it go. Different lifetime. Thank God. Not my lifetime. Thank God. They're in the garbage. And that's part of serving God, is putting that in the garbage. Anyone else?
I have a comment on that with jeans.
Yes, Dixie.
They are work clothes or whatever, or dress. But for the Gentile, they're not immodest necessarily.
Yes. So that is, as I said last week, the only two differences in laws of modesty for Noahide women and Jewish women is that for Noahide women, covering hair is optional, though very, very desired, and said pious. That's like a pious Noahide woman covers her hair, while for a Jewish woman, it's mandatory. There's no wiggle room. And the only other difference between Jewish women and Noahide women is pants, where a Noahide woman could wear loose cut pants, not tight pants, not form-fitting pants, but loose cut pants, like you're saying, work pants, loose cut work pants, and a Jewish woman's not allowed to ever wear pants. But I was giving the story with my friend to just express that point of her serving God was ultimately putting in the garbage. And that's how she served God. No, it wasn't giving to someone else, wasn't have someone else wear them. She knew that would be wrong. And she tried to reconstitute them, and that didn't work.
Aww.
And it's disengagement and detachment and coming to the point of saying, and it's very interesting, another woman who looks like such a refined woman, I only have known her since she's religious enough to not wear pants, and she said she had a very hard time giving up her pants, and for a long time they stayed in her closet until she threw them out. It was very hard for her. So, it might not be for you pants, or it could be tight form-fitting pants.
Right.
But, there's things that, as women, we have a connection to. It might be an emotional connection. And, oh, I look so good, or I have such good memories relating to this garment. And well, God says no, God says no. And it's the best thing I can do is serve God by throwing it out. It's not wasting it. That's how I'm serving God. If something you found you weren't allowed to eat, you're serving God by throwing it out. If you found something in your house that had an idolatrous sign, I had this actually recently with a woman I'm close to, very bizarre. You wouldn't think that's so realistic in our world. Idolatrous. Remember, she's in the political arena, and she was connecting with a group that has some, at least, cultural relationship to idols. And they brought her something as a gift that she realized had an idolatrous symbol. And she said, what do I do? It's in my house. I said, you destroy it. Throw it out. I said, first you have to destroy it, then you throw it out. And then she got on this rampage because she was so horrified that this energy was brought into her house. And she started looking at other things, and she found some other things. She found some Christian books that people had given her. She found something else. She found a few things. Yeah, it's idolatrous. Get rid of the idol and then throw it out. That's how you serve God. We serve God by throwing it out. I'm glad you raised this so everyone can think about that.
Well, I was wondering about it. So this is a good place to ask those questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm really glad you did, because if no one else had that experience, that's strange. Yes, I was really glad you raised that. Anyone else had anything else they wanted to raise about, their questions or thoughts on this?
Well, all I can say is when I started cleaning my closet,
Mm-hmm.
and changing to a more modest dress. But I did not get rid of my pants because I work in them and it's
Mm-hmm.
outdoors, and I'm not going to work in a dress in
Mm-hmm.
the horse manure. So, and being I'm not a Jew, so I did not have fall under that I couldn't wear my pants. My pants were not tight fitting anymore, though. They were loose and appropriate.
So that was fine. But did you have stuff that you had to throw away because you realized you couldn't give them to
Oh
someone
yeah.
else?
Well, I had shorts and everything. Yeah. And I did throw the shorts away because that causes somebody else to falter.
Exactly. So
And they
that's a
were
perfect
beautiful,
example.
expensive clothes, you
Beautiful,
know?
expensive shorts that Dixie served God by putting them in the garbage. That was serving God. That was not waste. That was serving God.
Well, some of them are cut up, quite frankly.
Okay, good.
They
And you
bagged
made them
at
into
them.
good rags?
Because I'm one person, I hate waste. And clothes, even if I cut up good clothes, that's fine. But
Yes.
they're not going to be used for sin.
Yes. Yes. Same thing. As I went through Barrow's clothing, I gave away what was in good condition. It was not in good condition that I could use as a rag. I kept as rags. I definitely would rather keep it as rags than put it in the garbage. And some stuff would not make good rags and were not fitting to give away, and they went in the garbage. Again, when you're throwing those clothes in the garbage, it's not waste. It's serving God. And that's a good point, because as godly people, we don't want to waste. It's a godly virtue not to waste, but this is not wasting. This is serving God.
Family usually just takes them and like throws them away, but sometimes we make them in rags.
Sometimes you make them in rags, just like I did. And thank you, Sabra, for being sensitive to that point. I think that was a very practical and sensitive point you raised.
Thank you.
So when we're looking at the laws of modesty, it's very interesting to know in Torah thoughts, the laws of modesty have two broad sources, what we call the wisdom of Moses and the wisdom of Yehudis meaning like the Jewish woman, both of which are absolutely binding. And Moses's body of knowledge is the guidelines from Torah, for example, that a Jewish married woman has to cover her hair, where is actually derived biblically, where it speaks about the woman who potentially was adulterous, we don't know for sure, was possibly adulterous, who's, as part of the process to get her to confess, her hair is uncovered, from which we understand that for a married woman, her hair is supposed to be covered, and uncovering her hair is a disgrace. So this is in Torah, this is permanent, this is institutionalized, this is unchanging. And as of course we know for a non-Jewish woman, it is not mandatory to cover the hair, but is pious. So pious could mean if you're not feeling like you're constantly able to do that, maybe you can sometimes do that as you are able to, well, I can't always be that as pious as I'd like to, but I do want to create times where I can be pious. There's also the body of knowledge from Yehudis meaning the Jewish woman, which is the accepted standard of modest dress in the Jewish community. The standards adopted by observant Jewish women, and these have assumed the status of law. This is unique. That's why I'm mentioning it. It's unique for modesty. No other commandant is dependent on human decisions. It's very unusual. God doesn't say, I'm going to rely on your innate sense of what's kosher. I'm going to rely on your innate sense of how you keep the Sabbath. I'm going to rely on your innate sense of how you should pray. He doesn't say that. He tells us exactly, this is kosher, and this is Sabbath, and this is charity, and this is prayer. But he's saying, I created women with an innate sense of modesty. I can rely on you to express that in your dress and in your demeanor. There are lots of nuances. There's lots of sensitivities within modesty. It's not just like your elbows and your knees. Like, for example, if you have male guests, are you supposed to be warm and friendly or not? Do you use other men's first names? Do men use yours? How do you introduce yourself to men? Any thoughts on this? Because what does this have to do with anything? I thought we were talking about modesty. All of this has to do with modesty. This is all part and parcel of modesty. Modesty is not only your elbows and your knees. So have you struggled with that or have experience in that area? Challenges in that area?
Oh, for sure. Even with the kids, it was like when the kids were little and they were learning to talk and we talked about their friends' parents, this is Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. And like all of my peers hated it. They're Miss, the most I could get is Miss, Mom or Miss or Mr. Dad, right? Of the other kids' names. And at work, there's no kids around, but yeah, everybody's first name basis. Yeah, that drove me crazy because when I was a kid, I mean, even now as a 35-year-old, if I run into my neighbors from when I was a little kid, they're still Mr. and Mrs.
Which is appropriate, which is what they should be. So you're saying you tried with your kids, but it didn't work.
I tried with the other parents, and the other parents hated it.
Right. That's why it didn't work. The parents are like,
Yeah.
no, we should be on a first name basis with your children.
Well, they didn't like it if I called them Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, and I've tried doing that with ourselves, introducing to the other parents. But if they're around their house saying, well, at Natalie's house and at Nathan's house, XYZ, they don't know who Mr. and Mrs. Sipes is.
It's hard because I think it's part of this world that we're all supposed to be like on a first name basis. We don't want this formality. A name is a very intimate thing. A name expresses essence. According to Jewish law, we're not allowed to say the first names of our parents, of our step-parents, of our in-laws, and I assume all those laws apply to a Noahide because I know Noahides also are obligated in honoring their parents, and that's all considered part of honoring the parent. So I would assume all those things are obligatory for the Noahide. And
we were never allowed.
What,
we
Dixie?
were never allowed. When we were growing up, we were never allowed to call older people by their first names.
And that's appropriate, and that's how it should be. But I'm saying, unfortunately,
we were raised
you were raised that way, but Natalie is saying she's trying to raise her children that way, and the world, not that her kids are resisting, the adults are resisting. And that how you were raised is how you're supposed to be. That is considered appropriate behavior, respectful behavior. It's disrespectful when you're too familiar. So I'm saying when a man is calling you by your first name, that's very familiar. Do we feel that? Not a relative, not your husband, your neighbor, your colleague calling you by your first name. Does that feel too familiar? That's like an innate sensitivity. Like, that doesn't feel right. I don't want to be on a first name basis with these people. I don't want to be so familiar and so close with these people. It's like sensitivity to laws of not being alone with men, which we have discussed and which are also applicable for Noahides. In the Hebrew, we call them yichud, all the laws of a woman or a man, can be alone, can't be alone, all the restrictions. But do we have a sensitivity? Does it feel wrong? Right? We discussed this last week. I remember Dixie was saying how she greets people on her porch. Do we have that sensitivity? Like, it shouldn't feel right. It's not just, oh, these are God's laws and I'm gonna, whatever, have to follow God's laws. Do we feel inside ourselves a sense of like, this doesn't feel right? This doesn't feel appropriate. It's too casual. It's too comfortable. It's too relaxed. We shouldn't feel so relaxed with men in our lives that are not our husbands or our brothers or our fathers or sons. It shouldn't be so relaxed. It should feel like, why are you getting so comfortable with me? You're a man.
Mm-hmm. Boundaries.
Yes. There should be a sense of boundaries. And our world works very hard on breaking down those boundaries. We're all the same, no difference. No difference between men and women. What a horrible message to give our children. No difference. It's very hard. Dove Bear, when for special needs, they work hard on them identifying the difference between men and women and like, oh, there's a girl and there's a boy, there's a girl, there's a boy. But how are you supposed to do that in today's world? Like in the religious world, it's very easy. Well, wearing a dress or a skirt, that's a girl. Well, long hair, that's a girl. Well, you can't do that in his public school.
Mm-mm.
How is he supposed to know who's a girl and who's a boy? Let alone what's going on in this world with gender. But I'm just saying, even the most simple way, where are the signs? Where are the barriers? Where's the sense of these are girls and these are boys? And those are two different groups. And they're not the same. And they shouldn't be treated the same. And they shouldn't be mingling as if they're the same. So as Noahides who were raised in this world, and Dixie was saying she was raised properly, but maybe not everyone had those advantages. Have you worked on trying to recreate a sensitivity that maybe you lost because of how the world accultured you?
Can I add one thing real quick about that? Not only were we raised like, we did not call our parents by their first name. Absolutely. You did not call your mom and dad by their first name. And that is
Absolutely. That's
quite
more than
common.
any other adult.
Yeah, but that's common nowadays.
Exactly. And it's a problem. And that's, I think, why Natalie's adult peers were resistant to being introduced as Mr. and Mrs. whoever, Mrs. So and so, Mr. So and so. And they're like, oh, no, we don't want to be that. We want to be on a first name basis with your 5-year-old. I'm like, why would you want to be on a first name basis with my 5-year-old? Like, don't you want to help me raise my 5-year-old to know that those are adults and these are children and there's a difference? So, have you seen this in yourself, the sensitivity, or have you regained the sensitivity as Noahides? Have you tried to regain the sensitivity?
No, but maybe I'll start trying to push it again. I'd given up on that one. I'd given up on that battle a long time ago.
I think it's really important. Just as Dixie said, she was raised that way. Why was she raised that way? Because that's a traditional value of respect. That's it's not like being demeaning to a child. It's good for a child to know that there are children and there are adults. I think it's very reassuring for a child to know there are adults in the world.
Can I add something real quick? I had gotten to the point, though, that I didn't want to be called Miss Dixie. It was like, I'm Dixie because of the society change. And so I had parents tell me, though, no, you are Miss Dixie to my kids. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, then I got used to it. And then I started expecting other people's kids to say that because it was like, this is the correct way. But I had to be programmed again because I got too familiar with society.
That's a great story.
Mm-hmm.
And you were raised that way, but then you lived in this world long enough that you forgot how you were raised. And then
So
when you
don't
had
give
some
up, Natalie.
parents that still knew the right values, and it was like, oh, and then it felt awkward, and then it felt right.
Mhm.
And that's a beautiful story. And I think that's true for every aspect that I'm talking about in terms of feeling comfortable with men. How comfortable with men? First name basis with a name. Should you be on a first name basis with a man? Should you be comfortable? Should you be comfortable with a man in your house? Like you have a guest. Now again, this is he's a guest and you're a married couple and he's a guest in your house. So kosher, kosher, kosher. But how comfortable should you be with him? How familiar should you be with him? How warm and welcoming should you be with him? What does that have to do with anything? It has to do with being modest. It has to do with being a modest woman. This was literally today's Torah portion. You know, the Torah is not only on a weekly basis, it's also divided through the days of the week. So this was literally Sunday's Torah portion, talking about when the angels are visiting Abraham, and they wanted to highlight Sarah's modesty. So they said, where's Sarah? So Abraham would say, oh, like, she's in the tent. Like, she's not hanging out here with us. She's in the tent. She's not hanging out with the men. Of course, the angels knew where she was. And of course, Abraham knew she was a modest woman, but it was just to highlight how modest she was, that she wasn't hanging out with the men. She could have. She was a married woman. Her husband was right there. But no, she's not going to be doing that. She's not going to be hanging out with the men. It's not.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, would she not, she was modest, we know. And so when they were asking where she is, are they meaning we're trying to be careful and not be around Sarah?
The angel asked where she was, knowing where she was, to highlight to Abraham, to put the spotlight on how modest she was, to make her even more dear and precious in Abraham's eyes. It's sort of like reminding him that he knows, but to highlight, like, look what a virtuous wife you have. Wow, she's so special. And Abraham was, well, of course, I know how virtuous she is. I know how modest she is. Sarah was considered what our sages say she was the most beautiful woman of all times. But she was very, very modest with her beauty. She was very careful she didn't know she was so beautiful. How did she look at it? That this is just how God made her and how God wanted her. And that was it. Just, this is God's will. You know, it was sort of inconvenient being grabbed by all these kings when she's like, 90 years old. But God made her that beautiful. This is what God wanted. She was God's princess. God wanted, the physical expresses the spiritual. So she was that beautiful. How did she process it? This is how God made me. This is how I serve him. This is an expression of his will. Just like Dixie's story, which I really appreciated about from Dixie back to Miss Dixie, we can regain sensitivity. And it's very easy just growing up 21st century America. Well, the things I'm saying for you to be like, oh, that's not my world. It's not my world. But it could be. You can make it your world. You could work on yourself. Because again, yes, modesty has a lot to do with clothing. And there's so many other aspects of modesty besides clothing. And a woman could be dressed modestly, but could be so immodest in how she talks and how she holds herself and her comportment. There's so many nuances and layers. And just as the world tries to tarnish and is very successful in tarnishing the innate modesty of a woman, because women are innately modest. Remember, we learned last week, as God formed us, with each limb, he said, be a modest woman, be a modest woman, be a modest woman, be a modest woman. So that's embedded in our psyche. It's deeper than any DNA, is God's evoking modesty from every limb of our body. That's our innate state, to be modest. And if the world has tried and has succeeded in stripping that away from us, we could regain it. We could work on ourselves and create, like Sabra said, boundaries, proper boundaries, God-ordained boundaries. And as we stick to those boundaries, we can regain the sensitivity we lost.
Can I tell you one more story?
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid, we had gym class, of course, and you had to wear your gym suits. And this is what destroyed my modesty. I hated it. I did not want to change my clothes in front of anybody else. So I would wait until everybody got their clothes changed, and then I would sneak behind a partition or something and get mine changed. And then I'd run get my shower after everybody else got their shower, because I didn't want to be showering with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And you were forced to, though. And that was the biggest scar on me that ever happened. And that led me down the path of where you do become immodest around other people. All because you're forced to.
So in school, they wanted you to change boys and girls together in front of each other?
No, just girls. Just girls.
This was
But
just
I
girls.
didn't want to change in front of
Right.
girls. I
And
want
they
to change
didn't,
in
they
front of
weren't
you.
like bathrooms or something you could change in?
Oh gosh, no. There's lockers lined up and you're right shoulder to shoulder.
You're right. That would very much strip away a person's modesty if you're being told there's nothing wrong with exposing your body. That
Well, now
definitely
you know
do.
why you got all these kids that are so immodest. They had to change in front of other kids in their school.
And then theater class was even worse. In theater, in the green room, it wasn't much of a partition. It was the back of a room with a line of costumes separating the two. And theoretically, the girls and the boys were supposed to be separate, but it was high school. A lot of the girls and the boys were intentionally less separate than you'd want. And I was a bit of a prude, and I always changed my costume all the way in the bathroom with the door closed. I was never any kind of a star, so it didn't really matter. But no,
Wow.
I remember one time, and I was a kid. I was 14 years old, and these older kids were giving me a hard time about, well, you're just not comfortable with your body. And I shot back at them. I'm comfortable with my body. I'm not comfortable with you being comfortable with my body.
Wow.
I
Wow.
was sassy.
Wow.
Irritated.
Well, that's amazing that I guess, again, your parents did something right. Going back to the beginning of our class, Natalie, because you're saying that the school was sort of wanting the girls and the boys to be changing in front of each other more or less.
Right. I mean, it was just like nobody cared. No, there was no effort made for modesty or, separation or anything. It was just, and nobody was supposed to notice. The teacher never said anything.
Wow. So you, unlike Dixie, you had the option of going to a bathroom, but you had to really make a big effort and get teased over it.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Wow. So I agree with Dixie, but as I'm saying, we can regain it, just like talking about first name basis. If you decided, well, I'm not going to call men anymore by their first name, it would feel really awkward for the first day or week or month, but you'd regain that sensitivity. And after a while, it would feel strange to use a first name for a man. Mm-hmm. It says about a certain woman that she had many sons who were the high priest, and the sages questioned her, like, what was your great virtue that so many of your children were the high priest? And she said, the walls of my house never saw my hair. Now that's pretty intense care with modesty, because obviously there are times when you're changing, uncovering your hair to cover your hair in a bathroom and a this and a
Mhm.
that. You're not like walking around with your hair uncovered, but the walls of her house never saw her hair. She's like, yeah, the walls of my house never saw my hair. I was that careful. And they were like, okay, wow, that makes sense then. Makes sense that you could have, this tremendous virtue on so many of your children. It's really, really important for us, and it transfers to our children, even without their knowing. Why? It just is a very, very, very important way of living as God wants a woman to live. Be modest, be modest, be modest.
Can I
And
tell another quick story?
sure, absolutely.
And this is about Jack, because remember, we weren't raised around Jews or anything. But Rabbi Moshe would come out to the place, and of course, nobody could touch him, which
Mhm.
was wonderful. And when, women would come up and want to shake hands, well, they didn't know, and we'd have to tell them. But this is what was amazing. Jack, he finally was told, you cannot hug another woman. I said, see, I told you. And so he would, and he's, oh, but anyway, and he didn't. He would, if somebody come up and hugged him, he couldn't do much about it. But he would never advance to hug another woman, or he would step back if they were going to hug him. And I was so proud of him. But that because we're not ever taught those things. And really, my mother was not a hugger. She never hardly even hugged us kids. But when we went to church, they started the hugging with everybody else. It started there. And then, it got familiar. Well, then when Jack found out that that was wrong, he quit.
Wow.
And, and I still to this day will not let another man hug me. I'll step back and I'll say, I'm sorry. Men don't touch me. And they usually take it great. They'll say, oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah, I've never in all my years had a man that ever gave me any flack over it.
Yeah.
It's just, when you,
Oh,
when
I
you
did.
demand that
I
respect,
did.
they usually comply and are usually like, oh, I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
whatever. Like, yeah, who do you think you are?
Well, I did. I had a family thing that, wow, it blew up. In fact, I had to leave.
Oh, wow.
It got so nasty because I wouldn't let them touch me.
Oh, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Wow.
Me too. It was bad.
Wow. Wow. Well, no, I guess God was kind to me. I've never had any problems with it, and it was always very strong. And also, I'm very careful, which is a little more subtle. Like, let's say you have, like, trying to think of an example. Like when my daughters were young, and their uncles, my brother-in-law is their uncle. They can't touch her either. Can't touch my daughter. Oh, she's just a sweet little girl. They don't mean anything wrong. Yeah, it's a 3-year-old girl. No, when she's 3, no, can't touch her. And that's something like people don't think about. Like, oh, she's such a little 4-year-old little sweet little kid, 3.5-year-old kid. No, yeah, she's too old to touch. So sometimes you have to say it appropriately and not. You have to say it nicely that the other person doesn't feel like you're saying I'm a horrible person. But part of keeping God's laws and believing in God's laws and knowing those are the laws that protect us and are the safeguards. Safeguards for our modesty, safeguards for our healthy relationships. All right, we will stop at this point. Thank you so much. To be continued, and hopefully process over the week. Look at your closet over the week. Think of Sabra. Give away
And
what you can
Bob,
give away.
Bob will thank you all.
Bob will thank you all that no clothes fall on your husbands when they open the door. Just listen, Sabra. You have a house. You can use a few closets,
Yes. Well, they're all like that.
They're all like that. Okay, that just means you're a woman. But, look through them.
I
Give away what
will.
you have to give away. If you
Thank
can't give
you.
away and you can't make a rag, serve God by throwing out and
I
knowing
will.
this is part of being a modest woman.
I will.